What's up guys and welcome back. Today on Trent's Garage we are going to be finishing assembling this motor or this engine. A lot of people have been giving me crap because I keep calling it a motor because that's just like something that people that don't work with engines all day do. I understand that a motor is an electric motor and that an engine is something that's gas powered, but I call it a motor all the time, so I apologize for that. Today we are going to do as much as we can to get the heads on the engine, to get the timing done, to get valve covers on, to get our oil pan and all that stuff assembled. I'm really hoping that by the end of the day we have something that looks like an engine that's like almost ready to be assembled and like have some plugs connected and thrown back in the truck, but we'll see how far we get. I'm going to pull this plastic bag off here and we're going to get started. All right, so now that I've got our short block out here, it's all getting ready and we're gonna prep it. I'm gonna clean off the head mating surfaces, and now instead of the head bolts that go in, they were stretch bolts, like what we used on the crank and the rods. These are actually gonna be studs. So I got some ARP head studs, so I'm gonna install those studs and put them in loosely, and then I'm gonna throw our head gaskets on, make sure everything looks good. The manufacturer's recommendations are to put some silicone in a couple spots on the head gasket. Then we'll be ready to throw on our heads and start torquing things down. All right, I've got all the ARP head studs put in and basically hand tightened with a little Allen wrench. Now I'm gonna go open up our gasket kit, check our head gaskets, make sure everything fits, start doing our little silicone job. Oh, I was like, where are my head gaskets? They're like underneath that cardboard. Thought for a second I got some weird kit that didn't come with a head gasket. I know I've talked about this multiple times, but I'm nervous. The further I get in the process, like the greater the nerves become. But I'm really excited to get this done. I do have to put a little bit of silicone, take one of the heads out, clean it up, get it ready, double check the manual where my silicone's supposed to go, and we'll go ahead and throw one of these heads on. All right, so we went to throw our head gasket on, and when I set the head gasket down, there's this open port right here, which is normal. There's, you know, open ports for water and oil and all types of stuff, but there's this dowel right there, and that dowel is running into the head gasket right here, and Brandon kind of pointed that out. He's like, it doesn't look like it's sitting flat. So when I looked at it, I was like, well, there is a spot there for that dowel, but the hole is really small. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And then the more I kind of looked at it and tried to figure it out, this is a spot for a dowel. So that dowel is in the wrong hole. So I'm gonna have to pull that dowel out and put it in here so that our head gasket actually sits on there properly. But the issue is that like the guys at the machine shop put those dowels into like what I think are these little water jackets. Now that we've got that removed, it sits in the right spot on the head gasket. We need to put on our external water pipe. It's kind of like a lot of engines do it internally, but Toyota does it externally on some of their engines. So there's a pipe that carries water to and from the engine, and basically that needs to be installed, and the NOx sensors need to be installed before we put the heads on. Not going down on that dowel. Got problems, man. I have come up with a plan. I was able to remove that dowel, and the side that was all marred up, I went ahead and kind of ground all the little like burrs and stuff off with like a little buffing pad, and it doesn't look amazing, but the bottom of it, and it's actually a little symmetrical piece, the bottom of it was still machined perfectly and looked great. So I took the side that was messed up, that we had kind of ground down with the buffing pad, I put it into the block, I tapped it into place, and I think it's gonna serve its purpose. I don't think we need to get a new dowel or anything like that. Could be making a huge mistake here. Won't know until this thing has issues, but we've got a dowel in there. I'm gonna throw the new head gasket on there, and if the head sets down nice and flat, we'll be ready to start torquing these things down. Well, that's 10,000 times better than it was. always a good idea to kind of set everything up the way that it came off in a very methodical fashion, even though all of these caps are numbered and lettered so you know which cap they are with intake or exhaust. It's just really easy to mix that type of stuff up, so it's best to have a process and a system. So I've got those set up. I'm gonna pull these cams out. Gotta throw that silicone on there and I can start torquing these things down.
Thanks for holding. How can I help you?
Hey, I was just calling to see if you guys have a socket in stock. I need a 3/8 drive, half-inch 12-point socket. All right, so I just called down to one of the local hardware stores. They have the socket that I need, and I told them to hold on to it for me. So we're gonna head down and pick up that socket, and then we'll come back and hopefully get these heads torqued on. That might be all we have time for today because of all the back and forth and issues that we're running into, but I'll be happy that we can at least get that done. And before we leave, I gotta pull this off and clean off that silicone because it has to be torqued down like within 15 minutes of applying it. So I'm gonna do that, and we're gonna hit the road. Well, we just got back from Napa. We had to run into town and get a new socket. So let me kind of show you the difference here. This is a half-inch socket. It's a half-inch drive, and it's an impact socket, so it's 12 point, which means instead of like a hex, like 6 points, it has 12 points. Now, the nuts that go on these ARP head studs, they are 12-point nuts, so you can't use a 6-point socket. Now this, how big around that actual socket is, wouldn't fit down inside the head. So now I had to go get a 3/8 drive with a thin wall that's also a 12-point in half-inch. Now you can see the size difference and probably why this one will fit and this one wouldn't. The good news is, now I can actually throw some silicone on here for the third time, get the head thrown on, lubricate all the bolts, and I actually have the right socket to get everything torqued down.
How come you have to lube up all the washers and stuff too?
Basically, any friction that's like introduced when you're trying to torque something will actually change the outcome of the torque or change the torque setting. So like if there's a bunch of friction from this washer like sticking against the head or sticking against one of the nuts or anything like that, or the threads having like any little burrs or stuff like that, or any extra friction, it'll make it so that the torque is actually, the torque wrench will click and it'll read a lighter torque than what it actually needs. So you put lube on all of the threads, all of the washers, all of the nuts, and then once you get those all threaded on, that lube provides it reduces all of the friction so that the actual torque is just all the clamping force. And that's exactly what we need. I've got all these nuts basically finger tight or tightened with the ratchet extension here. Now I'm gonna throw the torque wrench on and I'm gonna check my sequence of how these are supposed to be tightened in what order and what direction, and then I'm gonna go ahead and start torquing these things down. So I just went through, did the sequence twice, double checked everything is at 80 foot-pounds of torque. That's exactly where it needs to be. And I guess we just gotta hope I did everything right. So yesterday I actually had to cut things a little bit short. Brandon had to take off for the day. He was kind of helping me. But now it's the next day and I am back to working on this engine. I got both heads on. I got all the head bolts torqued. I got all the cams installed. I got the cam bolts all torqued down in sequence. Now the only thing that I really have to do, which is what I really want to accomplish in this video, is I need to get the timing chain put on and this motor in time. Then I can rotate the crank 4 cycles around, make sure everything is fully lined up, the tensioners are all on correctly. Hopefully I can put this thing together without too much grief. All right, so I've got the new tensioner in here. I've got my cam gears reassembled. I have the timing chain that connects these two cams together. The one thing I do have to be concerned about is I have to make sure I torque all of these properly before I take the tensioner out and get everything done. So I'm gonna look that up in the manual really quick. I'm gonna torque these 3 bolts, make sure that they're good, and then once I pull that push pin out right there, the tensioner will expand and it'll put tension on this chain, and this section will be ready to go. So you can see on this chain here, there's 2 dark links. This link and that link are darker than the rest of the links. So those actually go on the timing marks on these cam gears here. There's 1 mark right there, that little dimple. And then on the back side of this cam gear, there's 2 little dimples right there. That's where the other dark colored link goes. L right here, so that goes on the left bank. Kind of weasel this thing in here. Get it in the right spot. This goes on facing frontwards. And the proper teeth there. And it goes back on the cam where it's keyed in. Put that bolt on. And I'm going to torque down the bolt that holds the tensioner on, torque down my cam gear bolts, and we'll be ready to pull out these tensioner pins and start moving on to the main timing chain. All right, so now that I've got everything torqued down, when I pull out this little push pin, the tensioner is gonna apply tension on the chain and it's gonna keep these sprockets at the exact distance apart that they need to be. See, now there's no more slack in that because this pushes down on that chain and keeps tension on it. Those things where there's just not a lot of clearance here. So like if you don't have this thing perfectly set up and you don't have all the perfect amount of slack and all the gears in the exact right location, probably going to be pretty hard for you to get these teeth lined up. That right there is on the right tooth. Making progress. No matter where the slack is in the chain, the tensioner should take up the slack, and as long as I have the dark colored links on all of my timing marks, like I do right now, everything should be good. So I think what I'm gonna do now is pull this pin on the tensioner. It's gonna apply tension to the chain, and then what you wanna do to make sure that everything is set up correctly is you wanna rotate your crank 4 times, because it's a 4-stroke, and after 4 revolutions of the crank, all those timing marks should come back around to where they were. I'm gonna go ahead and torque down all of my guide bolts and my tensioner bolts to make sure that they're all ready to go. And then I'll pull this pin and we'll check, see if we did timing right. All right, well, this is one of the reasons that I'm not always super excited to be doing timing. It looks like I may be off a tooth. I might have not had enough tension on the right side of the chain when I put the crank at top dead center. Looks like my timing marks are off now, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this main timing chain back off, recompress the tensioner, and redo the timing again and see if I can get it right the second time. All right, I've gone through the entire process again. I've lined up all the timing marks. Now I've torqued down the guides over here. I've torqued down the tensioner here. Pulled my pin, taken out the slack in the timing chain. Now I'm gonna do 4 revolutions again, and I'm gonna see where we end up. There's 1. There's 2. 3. There's 4 revolutions. Right side bank is lined up, my intake on my left side bank, and my exhaust on my right side bank. The problem is, especially with timing chains, it'll look like the gear is like 1/10 of a tooth off. But if it's the next tooth or the tooth before that, it would be way more off than if it's on the tooth that it's on. So it's good. I think it's probably timed correctly. I guess we'll find out down the road, but I think I did it. I got the timing chain on, I got the heads on, I got the cams, everything in. I'm like ready to put timing cover on, intake manifold. But before I can do my timing cover, I've got to do a lot of prep on this timing cover, clean it up really good, clean up all the surfaces that are going to take silicone, that are going to seal a gasket. I've got to get the water pump put onto the timing cover. I've got to get the oil pump put into the timing cover. Just a lot of little tedious work that I'm just going to probably do like some time lapses. And by the end of this video, I should have most of this stuff assembled. But I feel like I'm on a roll today, so I'm going to keep working. And hopefully I can get most of this done. So I've been slaving away here for a minute or two. I've got the oil pump fully installed in the timing cover. I've got the water pump installed on the front of the timing cover. Pretty much all I have to do now is put seal packing or silicone all along the timing cover in a couple specific spots on the engine block, and then I should be able to slide it on and start bolting it in place. This is a little bit nerve-wracking because you don't want to have to take this back off, so I want to make sure I've done all the steps that this is going to cover up. And once you put that seal packing or silicone down, you got like 10 or 15 minutes. This stuff actually says 1 minute return to service. So you got to basically get this stuff bolted down very quickly after you start to put the silicone on. Just throwing all these short bolts in here. I'm going to tighten these all down and torque them, and hopefully we don't have any leaks when we fire this thing up. All right, well, I got pretty far. I've got the actual intake plenum cleaned up and it's just set in place, but it's not installed. I got the thermostat housing put on. I got the oil filter mount mounted here. I've got the thermostat housing on. I've got the harmonic balancer on. Basically, the front end of the engine is completely done. I need to do valve covers. I need to do the oil pans, intake plenum, some hoses maybe, and then it's basically assembled. And then we can mock it up on the truck so that we know exactly where the engine and the transmission are gonna stand when we're building the frame, which is gonna be a huge benefit. I'm really excited for that. If you guys enjoyed coming along on this adventure, make sure you show me by giving a big thumbs up on today's video. Don't forget to leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys on the next one.